everybody. Welcome to NTWC Plus for Peak Day. It is September the 10th, and halfway through the show, we'll get our tropical update. And there's some stuff going on in other parts of the world, but the Atlantic Basin, amazingly quiet. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Again, this is NTWC Plus. We've got Bill Reed here. Good morning, Bill. How are you this morning?
Doing good. Doing very good. Was at the NWA's 50th anniversary meeting. I hadn't been to one of those in over 10 years, and I was missing it. But they meet in September, which, if you're in the hurricane business, is a little dicey for travel. So it was good to make it this year.
I'm sure it was good. I want to hear some stories, but we'll wait till we get our guest on so you can share some of the things that you did while you were there, or maybe not. It was what happens in Huntsville.
You're recording this. Most of the stories that are worth hearing probably best left in my mind.
And in Huntsville. All right. Glad to have you along, Bill. Dr. Hal Needham, Hurricane Hal's with us this morning, somewhere not in your studio. Where are you, Hal?
I'm in Galveston. It is unbelievably comfortable for September 10th, so I'm outside. You don't get many days like this. We've had an offshore flow with cool front. It's just been unbelievable for early September, so I'm actually outside, but I'm still on the island. I'm in Galveston this morning.
The dew point's below 86. Is that what you're saying?
Our obs have been down for the last couple weeks, so I've been getting them out of Houston Hobby. But I did see Hobby drop down to 69 for an overnight low, and I think dew points were in the low 50s or something. It's been incredibly dry and comfortable for this time of the year.
Low 50s dew points.
We were 66 here in League City, Hal.
Yeah, we'll take it for early to mid-September.
Yeah. You northerners down here in South Texas, I think our dew point dropped to 74 this morning. The dew point dropped to 74. So we're living large too. It feels pretty good. And there's some rain right outside my window. Our guest today is Dr. Kim Klockow McLean. We'll get to her in just a second. But first, we want to thank our sponsors who make these shows a possibility each week. And there you see them, USAA. I can't say enough amazing things about USAA. They have been a big part of what we've been doing here from the very beginning at the Storm Science Network and the National Tropical Weather Conference at NTWC Plus. So thank you to USAA. South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau. Every year in April, we meet on South Padre Island. We invite you to join us, and they are gracious hosts, and they be sure to show us a good time, and they're great sponsors of this program. The Weather Company, Weather Boy, Live View, all groups that join in with what we do and help us get the word out about the latest in tropical meteorology, and today about social messaging. That's going to be where we're headed today, and let me turn it over to Hal to introduce our guests, and then we'll get the program started. Bill to introduce our guests, and we'll get the program started. Take it away, Bill.
Sure. I've known Dr. Klockow from 2008. I think that's when Kim asked me to speak to the student conference down there, and I got to talking with her afterwards about what she was looking at. Did you have your PhD yet then, Kim, or were you working on it?
Man, I think I was just about to start it probably when we met.
Yeah, and I was kind of a lone ranger, one of the lone rangers wandering around in the weather world. One of my things I've been talking about to fellow meteorologists is we're going to keep improving our forecasting, but I don't think we're going to make much change in the outcome with our improvements in the meteorology. We've got to figure out what doors have we got to open to get people to take the right actions. And Kim, you were talking about exactly that. How do you communicate the risk? How do you get people to personalize what it is? And it's amazing how far it's grown from there. I was actually able to get, I think, $90,000 of the $9 million Hurricane Forecast Improvement Project funding pigeonholed for doing research on just that issue. So welcome to our show, Kim.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you guys.
Great. Why don't you start, since most people probably don't know what you do. What is it you've been doing, and what are you doing right now?
Yeah, so right now I'm between contracts supporting NOAA. It's been a really fun year for a lot of us. Yeah. So, in the contracting joy. But what I've been doing since I was a graduate student is trying to infuse social science insights into our field. When you think about it, Bill, you were in this position of running an organization filled with physicists, physical scientists, hydrologists, and you had a risk communication mission. And we're not taught those things in our formal meteorology curriculum. And what you were talking about, you really had a number of different behavioral objectives, things in mind that you wanted to motivate with people in the public. I think there's nothing more high profile that we do than what happens in the hurricane realm. So what I have done, it includes things like I started what became the social science program in the NOAA Weather Program Office. So that was where we started a granting program for, all right, what's the research that we need to help fill our gaps? What's the current state of knowledge and where do we need to direct more funds? I went to the National Severe Storms Lab in Norman and started their social science research team. So while not tropically focused specifically, it was really geared toward thinking through within one of our weather labs, we're creating new technologies. We can do so much now with our technology. How do we design it in such a way that we ensure that it meets the needs of all of the distributaries in the weather communication system that will actually get it used by the public? So we needed to work with broadcasters. We needed to work with emergency management of many different kinds. And we were working toward building a model of co-production of technology rather than just what we think will help someone. What is demanded by our partners, and pull those things up and work with developers to iteratively get there. And then I saw an opening at the National Weather Service, and I came in. I actually left a federal role to come in as a contractor to do something really new. The national centers, NCEP, which includes the Hurricane Center as one of the national centers. The Office of the Director hired for a social scientist to help bring social science research insights into the national centers and coordinate some of that directly with operations. And I thought that was a really unparalleled opportunity. I did have the chance to support the wonderful folks at the Hurricane Center and talk about some of the contemporary issues in risk communication there for them. And yeah, I think what's really amazing is during the course of my career, which has been fairly short. I mean, I graduated about 12 years ago. In just that time, everything has exploded. And I've been delighted to be part of seeding, and caring for different institutions that really want to bring this in. We just have to do a little bit of work to figure out what those connections were, to make sure the knowledge doesn't just get infused on its own because it exists. We have to bring it into our institutions in the right way.
Yeah, that's great. I'm happy as a clam to see that it's been institutionalized. Now when I talk to forecasters that are still doing the daily grind or nightly grind, if your shift you're on, they all agree. They all have the same thing. We got to figure out how to get it. This means you fellas, you need to quit driving your pickup truck through a flooded roadway, that sort of thing. And I still think that's probably the biggest nut to crack is how do you figure out the human nature aspect and the wide variety of responses people have to the exact same message. Have you had any success in breaking the code on some of that?
Fortunately, I'm so grateful that the problem you articulated is huge. I'm so grateful it's not just me. There are a lot of folks who are working in different aspects of that. Something that has really struck me as I was working to build up, for example, my own research team at NSSL, the more inclusive that I got of people from different backgrounds. I hired an emergency manager. I hired somebody who had a background in broadcast, and I brought on people who were non-native English speakers, who came in as immigrants themselves. And we set them loose to explore these spaces and, explore, well, what does this look like if you're from different populations or you have different kinds of roles that you're trying to fill in this space? Everything. There's a huge architecture out there that supports the decision-making of any individual. What your emergency manager is doing and their risk perceptions that underpin all of that, the decisions your broadcasters are making, other local officials, state officials, politicians, the whole thing is going to influence you. So it's not just our messaging and, oh, what colors are we using? What words are we using? That can be part of it. But we have to treat these things as integrated systems. And for different populations, they also have different trusted leaders, right? Like they might not be part of or trust the formal warning system. And they might have other informal systems and networks that they're relying on. But if our goal is to make sure that everybody is reached, we have to break out of what's familiar and be more inclusive there. I think I started to have the greatest success when I started to do that and build out my teams to work together and recognize the different needs of different groups and be very intentional about that.
Yeah, that's it. The different ways people react to a crisis or a warning situation. With one of the reports I read after Hurricane Rita was pretty a good argument that was made for the number one thing that the people in the communities looked at was what was their family members and neighbors doing. Didn't matter what any of us were putting out. They were looking at Martha says, "Hey, there goes Mary. Their car's full of kids and dogs. Maybe we should get out of here." And it was usually the women convincing their husbands who really had to go.
Yeah, we see that a lot.
You do? Yeah.
Yeah, in every hazard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know it's true with the flooding. It's predominantly the roadway flooding fatalities are predominantly males, and in Texas, predominantly male and pickup that think they can ford the river.
Yep. Yeah. That's something that we see across not even just only weather hazards, but it's a sort of truism across risk decision science that men have they're more risk seeking than women. And there are deep-seated, sociological roles that play into that. Women is like a sort of caretaker of the home, and men, generally are the ones who are taking more risks to go out and outside of the home to seek those other opportunities. And these are things that have evolutionary basis. They've been successful strategies in a lot of cases. But when you're thinking about risk, there is definitely a role to be played here by folks who are encouraging preparedness and safety. That's something that is really critical. And it's interesting to me as a social scientist. I think it's something that has gone underutilized. There's a lot more that we could do. There's a lot of work that women in our society play that is unpaid and it's unofficial. So they're not typically the emergency managers. Typically, emergency managers are men. But the people who are actually influential, who are making these decisions in households, for families, for communities, are often women. And that's worth us considering.
Yeah, it works that way in my house. I got the chance to see how other cultures work in the hurricane business when I was at the Hurricane Center. It was kind of an eye opener to me, but I only got a short glimpse of it. Have you found any cultures that are particularly good at responding to hazards?
Culture can be there's a lot of things that can play into culture. I think what I have seen, I'll say this hasn't been the major thrust of my own research, but what I can say that I have seen is people who have had experience with previous hazards and sort of understand how the system works. They play such a critical role, and that helps. They prepare themselves and they reach out and prepare other people. I think we don't really fully appreciate how much work is done by those people to get all of society ready. We rely on these formal programs and we think that does all the work. But when I've gone into the field and done things like interview survivors, been part of the Hurricane Harvey service assessment, so on, for different kinds of threats, what I see are individuals who have some experience that motivates them to say, I'm not going to let my friends and family go through this. I want to make everything better. And they are just hungry for information. They're assimilating it. They're transmitting it among friends and family groups. We find in surveys time after events, that's a huge chunk of people, like you saw with Rita, something like 35% usually of people even just know that there is a threat from friends and family. That's where they find out about it. Mm-hmm. So this is a challenge before us. is not just reaching individuals and individual cognition. It's getting all of society like sort of keyed in and acknowledging those players and supporting those players. So when we're talking about culture of preparedness, what I have seen is it's really people who care for each other and who have some understanding of what's possible, and they reach out to people who they know and they care for, who they know are less aware and less plugged in, and it's that care work that makes everything happen.
You to me, you described Jeff Lindner and what he did during Harvey from Harris County Flood Control. He became the person that people wanted to listen to.
Yeah, talk about that more. And I mean, his is an incredible story, right?
Yeah, well, he was at the time, and he was the only meteorologist on their staff. It was mostly technical people running the flood warning system in there. But I think he basically took it upon himself, and the county officials are smart enough to let him run with it, to constantly be giving updates on social media and in the mainstream media throughout the storm. Most of us kept our power during. That's very weird to have 4 feet of water lapping at the door of your house, and everything's running, so we could all stay online. And I noticed that too in my small sphere of people, that the more I typed up what was going on in my house, the more people came back at me. And when I talked to Jeff afterwards, he said it was just. It just, he gave you goosebumps to see you realize all of a sudden there's people dependent on what you're saying. Yes. And that's pretty cool. And that leads me to the next question. Do you see the ubiquitous role of social media? This is one of the plus things to me. Do you see that being used better as we go along for getting the word out to people?
Better is such a loaded question. What does it mean to have information go out effectively? That's a really interesting thing to unpack all on its own. I think what we are seeing with social media is there's so much potential there to get messages out, and it's another way that people can reach each other really efficiently. So the question I think that we're seeing in social sciences, they're trying to explore what messages do get picked up, what ends up getting promulgated through those social networks. And we're trying to find ways to assess the quality of what's going forward. One of the things that I don't think we really know what to do with, or we haven't fully wrapped our arms around the consequences of, is the rise of digital meteorologists who are competing now in this marketplace of YouTube and TikTok and whatever else. And those formats of information delivery really favor having things like little thumbnails, things that we would call clickbait, but they're the entrance point to get people to tune into a channel. And a lot of those folks are creating content that has hooks to it to get people to come in, to click, to engage. And you often find with them that their content after you get through the click is very, very good, very reasonable. But there's these questions about, well, if the presentation on the front end is the 284-hour GFS, presented as deterministic, here's going to be a hurricane making landfall in New Orleans in, well over a week, like week 1 to 2 weeks. Right. It's, that's beyond the realm of credibility for the science. Is it even a good thing for that message to be getting out at all if there's hardly any quality to that forecast? And
I try to tell people that model canes are detrimental to your mental health. Don't look at them. Right.
So there's limits here that we're trying to explore as a field. But something that we did at NWA this week.
Yeah, I was just
is that
right to that. I think, and I'll follow up just from the local area here. We have a pretty good cadre of really good people in the digital world. You got Space City Weather. It's Matt Lanza, Eric Berger, and Matt Lanza's got a thing going there, and there's several others that are very good, including Hurricane Hal. And I've been leaving you out of the discussion, Hal. Why don't you know more about this any more than I do, because you're actively working in it for a paycheck. I'm doing it for fun.
Oh, I'm just enjoying the conversation. This has been a fantastic NTWC so far. Boy, there's a lot that we've talked about. I wanted to follow up, Bill, what you said about people noticing their neighbors and friends leaving. Tim, I wanted to ask you, this concept, mandatory evacuations issued, as people are waiting, consulting their friends and family, what kind of delay are we looking at here? I mean, how long are they processing this until they make a decision?
I wish I could claim to be an expert on that. From the research that I've seen, though, I think there can be some variability by the circumstances of a given event and the kinds of populations that are affected. I know that this was at issue, though, with Irma, for example, or not Irma. Sorry, oh my gosh, all these I-named hurricanes. Just all right.
I-named storms. We're tired of them.
I know. Stop always being Ian. I believe it was Ian, the one that hit Florida, that had the numerous fatalities from Fort Myers.
Yeah, Irma caused a delay to some extent. They were expecting a bad storm in Irma, and they kind of did, but it wasn't a catastrophic one. So the next one up, well, let's make sure it's going to be bad. And when you're in a big city like Hal and I are, or Southwest Florida, that's not good.
Yeah, when those evacuation notices, there are timelines that are really critical for moving all of the populations at risk. And if those do get delayed, which it can come down to the risk perceptions of a single decision maker, like an emergency manager. If that happens, that can affect a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So we are seeing the thing that's a struggle is evacuation isn't without cost. And there are these community leaders feel, that it's on them to sort of weigh the costs and benefits. Risk is, in weather, we think of it very much as, well, it's just so obvious. You have to care about the weather. That's the most important thing. So get out of there. But there are this whole system of arbitrators of the decision about what is a risk worth attending to and responding to. And sometimes those are even elected officials. I mean, in our system, there are some countries where mandatory means mandatory. They force you out. In our country, the decision to make something even mandatory, that comes from a lower level of government, a more local level, and there is no necessarily, enforcement arm to force people out. So we take a more individualistic, liberty-centered view on responding to hazards than some other countries do. And that can make things a little bit less prompt, but we're looking at a series of competing values there.
Kim, from a social science perspective, what advice would you give for forecasters and weather communicators knowing that there can be a delay? Is there wisdom in just sharing that message again and again and again? I mean, do some people need 6, 8, 10 times to hear that message until they're going to respond?
Yeah, sometimes, yes. I mean, what I understand has been so successful, and the Hurricane Center has done such an amazing job with this, is building relationships. And and Bill can speak to this, the work that you undertook there. Maybe you want to talk about it, because there's nothing like it elsewhere in our national centers, at least, that I saw. The outreach to local levels to do things like setting thresholds, decision thresholds. Like, this is where, all right, if we have a storm surge of X amount at X lead time, like the probability of reaching this exceeds this threshold, like they sort of have gamed out, all right, if that's what's going to happen, then we'll trigger these actions. And they've worked it through their planning system. It ultimately is up to those officials to institute that plan, but at least it does. That is a huge hurdle to have at the front end. Bill, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, the history behind it really started with Doc Simpson after Camille. He was just stunned that people didn't evacuate because he said there was a Godzilla hurricane going to hit him. And of course, it wasn't. TV didn't have the capability to show much satellite or anything in '69. And the genius in the process was, he got the civil defense predecessors to emergency managers, civil defense officials, to work with him. And that led to developing evacuation plans that involved emergency managers and the Hurricane Center. And that's how it's grown out of that. And we took the stuff we learned from people like you, and I think most of the communities, I know we do here, we build at least a 6-hour ramp up time in the evacuation timeline. We got here's how long it's going to take to get X million people the hell out of here. Add 6 hours for them to get over their denial. And well, now it's gotten to where the capabilities, we can do stuff like this with the communities. It's impossible for a handful of people at the Hurricane Center to visit 2,000 counties and tell them about the hurricane problem. But now we have so many ways to get to it, and you keep the door open. If they come in, you talk to them.
That's right.
Yeah, guys, it got me thinking about the persistent messaging you see in marketing, right? I mean, in just about a month, we're going to start seeing Christmas stuff in the stores. And you think, what in the world? It's only late October, but they know people might need to see that messaging, dozens of times. There's, I think, science behind it. I wonder if some of that persistent messaging does pay off in the weather world, too.
Oh, yeah. We have to constantly be working at it. And in part because the hurricane vulnerable populations along the coast, we're getting influxes constantly of people who come from other places that aren't themselves acclimated to hurricane threats. They might not be as aware of the infrastructure around it. They don't know what mandatory evacuations even mean. Like, you've got people who come from, like where I'm from, the upper Midwest, that retire down to Florida. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, it has to be constant. It has to be continually refreshed. It's not just populations aren't just static. And that's something that makes this such a lift, such an effort. But those efforts I cannot share further. Like those efforts that are put on to do the constant communicating about what are the plans, how does the system work. It might feel repetitive, but it does such important work.
Yep.
Kim, before we get into our mid-show break, I absolutely want to follow up with what you said about the mobility of society. I always had this picture, the long-term people know best, right? I was shocked. We talked about Hurricane Ian 3 years ago, Southwest Florida. I interviewed a couple that nearly drowned in their house. They were from the upper Midwest. They said everyone back home in Illinois and Indiana said, get out of there. This is a catastrophic hurricane. They said it was actually the locals that said, oh, you guys are just green. You've never been through a storm before. We're having hurricane parties. It was actually the locals that said, we've been here since the 70s. We've never had a big surge. It was the people from out of state that actually understood the risk better. It was opposite of what a lot of us would have expected.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. And I can't help it. I think there was a lot that went on in Ian. In part, it sounded like people, too, were inferring that the trajectory was going to keep going more toward Tampa. And so people were just looking at it like, oh, well, it's not going to be us. But something that I've researched in the past that for severe weather, I've researched it in depth, but I've seen the same kinds of things crop up for hurricanes, is people look at previous events and they don't see things climatologically the same way we do, where we're looking at the planet, from the sky down, and we can see, well, the fact that the hurricanes in the past went here instead of here is a matter of chance, a matter of the synoptic conditions that blew things one way or another. But people reason from the ground up, and they see the way that they understand space and place, and the distinction between one town and another. They are looking at landforms and features, and they are attaching, well, there must be some meaning to the fact that something went someplace before and didn't go to this other place. And I've measured this, like psychometrically for severe weather, that there are places in Oklahoma where I'm based, where the risk perception is enormous. People feel like, well, we've had tornadoes that have gone through here, like Moore, Oklahoma. It's a tornado hotspot. And the town just south of it, Norman, where we have hundreds of meteorologists, the perception of risk is almost half. And people are less likely to prepare during things like a tornado watch. They claim they do the same things in a warning, but if you're not preparing earlier, then you might not be as successful at the warning time scale. So this is a concern. And I really appreciate that people are paying attention to the climatology. And that's wonderful, but they're reasoning about it in a way that doesn't connect with the way that we think about hazard climatology for rare events. So some work needs to go on there.
This is all fascinating, and I forget that I'm part of this program because I sit back and listen to what y'all are saying, and it's terrific. But let's take our mid-show break. So, Bill, you got a tropical update for us, and then we'll get to Hal's geotrek update in a moment. But Bill, for being so quiet in the Atlantic Basin, you've got like I've allotted 15 minutes for you. So take it away.
Yeah, I could talk the whole hour, but you'll shut me up. That's for sure. Real quick on the last subject we were talking about, there are roughly 1 million people living in the Houston, Galveston area now that weren't here when Ike came.
Wow.
It's a constant. I learned early on you give the same talk over and over again because you always got new people that don't have any idea what they've gotten into when they moved here. But that's a great subject. I could talk evacuation forever. If we bring Jamie Rome on and do a 2-hour show, Kim, Jamie, and Bill. Okay, let's talk tropics. Well, that's not the slide I wanted. Okay, let's get to the right one. There we go. Let's start out in the East Pacific because that's the only action in town in our hemisphere. Kiko, I'll talk a little bit about it, is gone post-tropical. Probably did a while back, but it was close to the islands and very, very excellent forecast. It was a pretty well forecastable storm in the environment. Next one up is getting ready to form, but it'll probably be a couple days before it totally gets its act together. First on Kiko, this is the shortwave IR. You can see the low-level swirl. That's the remnant low moving away now from the Hawaiian Islands. The mid-level circulation is almost opened up all the way, but you can see how far it's been sheared off. And even though it's now heading over warmer water, it's a hostile environment, so it's not going to be a significant player out there. The surfers were excited about this. This was the forecast from a couple days ago, the analysis of the seas, and the tight little storm there was generating waves in the 20 to 30 foot range that eventually evolved into nice swells on the north-facing shores of the Hawaiian Islands, which I don't know nothing about surfing, so I can't help you on how good that was. But you can almost find how the intensity goes just by following the wave height forecast to where we are now, where it's the swell, the waves of 9 to 13 feet are not unusual in Hawaii. So that's where we are with Kiko. The Eastern Pacific cluster of storms that's been percolating away south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec. A little bit of a clustering in there. There's a kind of a monsoonal trough circulation in there. We'll probably get a low out of that as advertised in the next couple of days. As to its future, I don't spend a lot of time on these without a defined low yet. These exact tracks and what the models come up with are likely to be different. But the gist of the thing is there's a nice, strong subtropical high parked over northern Mexico, nosing into South Texas, allowing Tim, Hal, and Bill to not worry so much about hurricanes for the next week or so. And as you would expect with nothing already developed, the intensity forecast, pick the one you like. It's anywhere from it doesn't develop to a hurricane. And that's enough for that one. September 10th, the supposedly peak day of the hurricane season, though. Brian McNulty had a post this morning. He's a researcher in this line of work where he looked at other aspects of how you would define the peak activity. And all of his parameters came up with September 12th, which I find is really cool because that's my mom's birthday. And then here's what we got out in the Atlantic. There's weather out there, but nothing that's imminent for development. A Tutlow in the Northwest Caribbean interacting with a wave right now and was producing some convection overnight, kind of waned in there. The lovely front that brought the dry air is draped over the Gulf Stream, and usually this time of year, if I see convection in the Gulf or along the Gulf Stream, we're looking for potential development, but other aspects of the dry air and the westerlies are preventing that from happening now. Here's the main development region. Here's most of the Caribbean. Dry air, stable air. Really unusual. We had a pattern like this for a while last year that put a kibosh on part of the season. So here we are. It's why we don't forecast this stuff beyond 7 days, folks. But this is a somewhat choppy loop over Africa from Meteosat. And there's a wave coming off now that originally I thought maybe the models were picking up on, but I actually think it's this one back here down the road in a week or so that comes off of Africa that the models seem to grab something with. We had the guy from Google DeepMind on a few weeks ago, and the Hurricane Center is actually collaborating with them to evaluate the utility and accuracy of their model. So this is like an ensemble of the AI runs of DeepMind for this system, and it first picks it up in a little over 4 days as it comes in south of the Cabo Verde Islands, and it likes it. And I like it because it takes it off into the Atlantic instead of the Gulf of Mexico. Just a few members that come in south, and I wouldn't get too carried away. I'd normally stop this thing way back about here. Though some of their studies show that they can extend the level of skill farther out than the deterministic models, the physical models. So maybe I should go a little farther with it. But anyway, that's a couple of weeks from now. So I'm desperate for things to cover. So I'm looking around. I said, "Holy crap! What's that over Pakistan? Pakistan! That's a depression. It's a depression that's caused severe flooding and loss of life in Karachi. Nothing on the news about it. I couldn't find anything outside of the Pakistani news or Al Jazeera that had anything about it to come up with what has actually happened. But here it is. It's nighttime over there now. Karachi's back here, so it's getting ready to exit Pakistan and affect Iran in there. And it formed over India. Monsoonal trough. Here's as far back again as I could go. I don't know how far east it formed on. Here's the monsoon, southwest monsoon, and the east winds over here in the trough, and it formed over land. The land came, just like Aaron in 2007 over Oklahoma, regenerating. And it's just, that's precipitable water values in there are very high. And obviously when you have that in a slow moving storm, you get a lot of rain. The model kills it pretty much and brings it out in the Arabian Sea. So I'll actually keep track of that. Might be interesting. They actually, they're current on their Met service. It has the forecast made 2 days ago and nothing newer. That's kind of scary, but they actually did a good forecast of it. I won't try to pronounce these city names, but they're forecasting flooding and heavy rains at least 2 days in advance of it. So that was encouraging. So you ask, how often does Karachi get hit with a hurricane? Well, here we go. There's the history of it. It probably goes back to the mid 60s or early 70s in that database. One storm going the other way is the only one I have that actually directly impacted Karachi. So extremely rare event, guys. And there you have it. There's my walk around the tropics for today.
You did good for saying there's nothing going on in the Atlantic. That's good, Bill. Well done.
I can make something out of nothing better than anybody.
Oh, you did. And that the Karachi stuff is interesting. That's fascinating, as it all is. And I thought, and Lowry said something, and Mike Lowry said something in his message yesterday about how this is only the third time in modern history that we've gone the first 2 weeks leading up to September the 10th without a named storm in the Atlantic Basin. But it's it's pretty rare. But one of those times was 1992, of course, which was the Andrew year, which. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah,
we had well, segue in the Hal segment there, the Great Galveston Hurricane in 1900 was the first storm up that year.
Right.
There are a lot of seasons that nothing really gets going until the end of August, early September. So Al, you're going to tell us about the 125th ceremonies and what?
Yeah, that's right. I'm here in Galveston where we just commemorated the 125th anniversary of the 1900 storm, the deadliest disaster in U.S. history, struck Galveston Island on September 8th, 1900, killing around 6,000 to 8,000 people on the island, but many more when we consider the mainland. And like we were chatting about earlier today, when you bring in the indirect impacts of dysentery and disease spread, it was likely much greater than that. There was a lot going on here on the island for it. We actually had a lot of media attention this past Saturday with 7,000 people on the seawall. The Guinness Book of World Record was here to officially declare the Galveston seawall the world's longest continuous walkway or sidewalk. It runs 10.3 miles now. And if you ever get on that with a bicycle, you can keep going for a long time. That seawall was built 17 feet above mean low tide. I want to mention this, though. A lot of Galvestonians say, hey, we look back at the devastation from 1900. It'll never happen again. We're protected by the seawall. We're protected by the grade raising. That 17-foot seawall was 17 feet above mean low tide, which 120 years ago was only 15 feet above high tide. In the past 120 years, we've had about 3 feet of the ground subsiding combined with sea levels rising. So that 17-foot seawall today is barely over 12 feet over high tide. So if we had a massive surge, which we've seen in the neighborhood just 5 years ago, a 19-foot storm surge from Hurricane Laura in southwest Louisiana, something like that here in Galveston, we would absolutely have a lot of salt water flowing right over the seawall, which is our highest part of the island. So the entire island could be inundated. And I want to encourage people as well, look back at the 1915 images of hurricane damage in Galveston. You'll see houses upended. You think it's 1900, it's not. It's 1915, and it's behind the seawall. So the tremendous waves crashing in the air, scouring out the ground behind it. We actually had fatalities behind the seawall from storm surge in 1915. So, and of course, 2008, Hurricane Ike flooded about 90 to 95% of Galveston City. So the seawall does protect us, and we commemorated that, but we're still vulnerable from the harbor side and still vulnerable, of course, to hurricane winds as well. We have a special play on the island, and if you're in the Houston, Galveston, Southeast Texas area, the play is called Galveston Wind. It really recreates the setting of Galveston in 1900. Last night was the opening night. I was there to share some words about the 1900 storm. That play is running through Saturday. It's called Galveston Wind at the Scottish Rite Cathedral. You can still get tickets. It's a fascinating play. And lastly, I wanted to close with really Saturday, Sunday, Monday, we had 3 sold out Galveston hurricane tours. I can't tell you how many interesting people were on these tours that had their own storm stories. Sometimes people have ancestors that survived the 1900 storm. We had a woman on the tour on Sunday evening who actually rode out Hurricane Carla in Galveston. The eye was well south of us in Carla, but we had really powerful tornadoes cut across the island. And she actually recalled going down 21st and 23rd Street. She said the homes looked like doll houses. Their fronts were sheared off, and you could see all inside them. Those tornadoes from Carla did a lot of damage. And we have Carla neighborhoods. You can actually go to some communities in Galveston where you're looking at the beautiful old Victorian wooden homes, and all of a sudden you see 5 or 6 houses that look like they came right out of 1961, because they did. Where those tornado swaths came through, they were replaced by mid-century modern, a lot of small ranch brick houses that you can actually see the swaths of the Carla tornadoes to this day. So keep that in mind. If there's a hurricane that passes well to your left, quote unquote, those tornadoes can be far away from the eye and the eye wall in those bands to the right. That's what we saw here in 1961 from Hurricane Carla. I could go on all day. I'll land the plane here, but if you want to check out the hurricane tours, go to GalvestonHurricaneTour.com. And again, Galveston Wind play right here in the city through Saturday.
I've done that hurricane tour, Hal, with you a year or two ago. Just fascinating. You do a great job of explaining the history behind the storms and showing the high water marks in various places throughout Galveston. So I'll echo your sentiment that if somebody's in the Galveston area, hook up with Hal and take the tour, because it's absolutely amazing. Is there a GeoTrek podcast on the 1900 storm, since we're talking about that real quickly?
You know what? That's interesting. We've touched on different aspects, but we've never really done the storm, just an entire podcast episode. And I think we're going to do that. There's so much content there and so much history here. So, and again, I'm glad you mentioned the GeoTrek podcast. You can listen to the GeoTrek podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. We're telling stories about extreme weather and natural disasters not covered by the mainstream media.
Great. Thanks. We appreciate that.
If you do that, if you do an official one on that, I'd love to work with you on that.
I think we really should do it.
So long. That'd be great.
Well, there's so many aspects and angles to it, but there's also a lot of lessons learned that people could apply today.
Cool.
Well, let's bring our guests back into it. Let me ask the one question that I'll get to ask today, and I because this is so fascinating. I'd rather just sit back and listen. But Kim, has there been a time in your career so far that you see something and you say, "This is why I do this"? You know, the message was received, or something happened that you go, "Ah, yeah, this is it."
Oh, What a good question. Honestly, what I love the most about doing this work is helping to bring success, peace, and comfort to meteorologists. So what I'm here to do is both help make sure that you're as successful as you can be in what you're trying to do, but also if disasters happen, to help bring peace that sometimes there are things that happen that it's not any failing of the weather communication system per se. Sometimes we can't put people in concrete bunkers. We don't live in a country where people are forced to comply with even really well-designed orders. We have a society rife with inequities of many kinds, and we, in the face of that, can't be expected to just overcome all of that with just messages. There are so many people for hurricane evacuation. There's so many people who are living right now without $500 in their pocket disposable income to evacuate with. These are wicked problems, societal level, enormous problems. And sometimes I exist to help bring, improve the mental health of our forecasters and communicators, because I think we get into this business to save lives. And we take it so personally whenever anybody dies. I know I certainly got into this business for the same reason. I wanted to make sure nobody was ever hurt, that everybody had the best chance that they could have. But much like doctors in an emergency room, I think we have to recognize that we take in, just like they take in patients, and they can do the best that they can. They're not God. And we have a very similar problem before us. So I know that might not be what you thought I would say, but I think it's actually our field that I'm the most proud and derive the most joy from being able to help.
Thank you. Fascinating answer. Go ahead, jump back in if you've got another question.
Yeah, Kim, this one's a bit heavy, but over the next decade, what do you think is the biggest opportunity, and what's the biggest challenge facing extreme weather communication?
Oh, the biggest opportunity and challenge, they're probably both the same thing, that our entire communication infrastructure is shifting rapidly, but also we have a rapid shift happening in just our governmental systems that support and manage disasters. So, I think we've seen it in 2025. I don't know any of us who aren't concerned now about how is disaster preparedness going to run? Who's even going to be the point people for if there's a landfalling hurricane this year? I don't know if any of us know exactly how that's going to bear out. And running an experiment like that is something we have never seen in modern times. So the destabilization of our political systems and the destabilization of our communication systems with the emergence of all these new platforms and all of the things that are shifting in the media landscape, out of that could come some really wonderful things. So I'll look to the hopeful for a second. What I see as possible now is something that wasn't possible when all the communication was just wide area communication and you tried to just do the best you could for the most people with like television broadcasts. Now we have the capability to have streamers who are themselves representatives of various populations, maybe people who know how to reach people who speak different languages, who are from different countries, who are more or less acclimated to situations. They are able to get into those places in a much more targeted and relevant way. And the diversification of communication networks that's possible now is just astonishing. And I really hope that as a community, we can lean into that potential and do so much of that reaching people that have never been reached, but who are often the most vulnerable people in society, and find ways to not just connect them with the weather information, but connect them with the resources. How can they, with the resources they have, succeed in protecting themselves? That takes a lot of groundwork, a lot of legwork. But I think where we're seeing so much now changing in the landscape of both disaster governance and disaster communication, if we can be intentional about trying to put those pieces together, we could do better than we've ever done before. And I sincerely hope that happens.
Yeah, that's a big piece of the bigger picture of making a place more resilient. The part you're working on there is the part closest to what most of us in the business can work in. One of the things I would do with it when we had a bad event that we had some loss of life on is okay, here are the successes we had on this. You guys did the best you can. We're talking about putting out information on an uncertain event. You don't know, except in a very short time scale, exactly what's going to happen anyway. You're doing the best you can with the information you got. And oh, by the way, because I'm an old guy, I can talk back to my first warnings were issued on a 25-word-a-minute teletype that I naively thought people in the hill country were getting the message on when all their power and phone lines were out. Look how much farther you've come since then. So that's what I try to do is say here, we're pushing the needle further and further up the line, and as you pointed out, it's never going to be perfect. There's too many people and too many other things that you have no control over that changes the equation.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's so good to look to those lessons. We could so easily suffer from a plague of hopelessness because you just get burned out if you come in with this extremely optimistic view. You do so much work and you're so excellent, really, and then you hold yourself to an impossible standard. That's a recipe for burnout. So doing what you were doing is
I never suffered that, probably because I'm the anti-perfectionist. Get her done and move on, kind of thing. I might want to shift gears while we have a short time left. One of my blind spots is I think the products we were putting out at the Hurricane Center were absolutely perfect, and then you find out nobody understands the damn things. And Gina, when she was in grad school, had a poster session at AMS and had things about the cone, and it was fascinating what people interpreted it as. And I kind of went back to the office with my tail between my legs and said, God, we're not doing a very good job. We're still doing the cone more or less the same way. Yep. Have you been involved in trying to crack the code on what products, how to make products more effective?
Yep. The Hurricane Center, Jamie Rome, this is just a drum that he is really trying to beat. We ran a national level integrated warning team meeting here at the NWA meeting 2 years ago. And part of the purview for the Hurricane Center was, hey, we have started to see you guys are still running like 75% of the broadcast media. Their time spent in hurricane coverage focuses on the cone, which itself is tied to just the eye wall and wind speed and tracking that. And none of that is where people die, and just it's the wrong geographic focus, it's the wrong scale, it's the wrong hazard. And he, asked, got engaged in a conversation, why is this the case? And really made the case for what the Hurricane Center has undertaken in recent decades has been, all right, moving on from the cone, we have developed storm surge products, which storm surge is one of the bigger killers. It was one of the harder things to develop, to estimate. You can't communicate something that you don't really estimate well in the science to begin with. So a lot of work needed to go on there to render that visible. And that has been made. And I know that I was working with the Hurricane Center on developing more probabilistic products to communicate arrays of different, ranges of outcomes, to tell better stories as, a whole. And there's a lot of partnership going on with, for example, WPC and the National Water Center to talk about inland inundation, a whole other layer to this onion that is so important to get at. I know that we have a short time here. Obviously, that could be its own whole show, is the compound hazard aspect of hurricanes and communicating that. But what I will say is it is very much the heart of the Hurricane Center that people, who are communicators, really try to shift the emphasis from the cone of uncertainty, which isn't really well understood anyway, because it's a statistical understanding of what is likely based on historic track error. It's not the error endemic to the storm, and shift more toward the products that are derived by looking at the uncertainty endemic to the storm. That's what storm surge product is. It's looking at this storm and its potential array of realistic features. And even maybe have some recognition. There's been research that's gone on and recommended we should start to focus more on model tracks, because that's what users are seeking, whether we want to talk about them or not. A lot of great work out of NCAR has shown emergency managers go and look at tropical tidbits, and they're looking at all of the models. And that, because it's endemic uncertainty, it's the uncertainty of this given storm. Sometimes we know that it's going to go due west or due east, and it's more useful to look at the spaghetti plots that are showing a due west, a due east set of like bundled solutions that you can see it's bimodally distributed, rather than the cone, which is like, well, I'm just going to pick one of these. And based on the last 5 years of error, and it does not tell the story. So there is a lot that we have at our disposal to tell better stories. And that's where the social science is really trying to help pull it all together and say, move more that direction than just sticking to one track and talking about how good we've been at forecasting that one track in the past.
Yeah, it could be. The challenge I see in that, I agree totally. I see that all the time, is that there's various levels of understanding of what all those different model tracks mean and what the potential biases in them are. And I found a lot of people tend to follow the ones that fit the desired outcome they want. Like if you're worried about people evacuating and you're kind of on the edge of the threat area and there's models showing it hitting there, you're going to emphasize those, which is I'm probably being overly protective of it, but I always tell everybody the best line on the spaghetti plot is the official forecast. They've taken into account their knowledge of all these different models and put that out that way. And that goes back to, but that only tells you the general idea where it goes. Look at all these other products and what's going to happen. And that's right. That's what we talked about earlier there. Yeah.
It's the coupling of the two, I think, where all of the great stuff can happen. That's what's tough about communicating hurricane threats. It's not just one product. It's not, you can't put all the work on the cone and expect people to be able to.
Do you think them going like Facebook Live and things like that with every advisory is helping with that? Because I like it. I think it touches a lot of those points.
I like it. I think everything that you can do to promulgate more of the storytelling about like I said, the array of potential futures. One of the things we were talking about in the Weather Service, I know we're running up on time, but quickly, when we're thinking about communicating probability information, like communicating forecast uncertainty, that's part of what the cone of uncertainty was created to do, right? I think it's important to recognize that's one way to slice the possibility spectrum. And what we're learning from research, including what I mentioned from NCAR, is that people do really well to plan when they can see something of the range of what's possible. So a best guess track, the so-called official deterministic forecast that you put a little bounds around, is one way to do that. And that is a wonderful way to rally everybody around one solution, because for evacuation decision-making, everyone sort of has to have the same playbook. But we also know those folks who are making those decisions are reasoning, and they need to have sort of in their mind, okay, how does this go together?
Before we had the cone, that's exactly what I would do. I would take, here's the official forecast. Here's probably a farthest west case track, and here's a farthest east case track, and then we talk decision making based on that. So it's a much better way of showing it. Now you got much more tools.
Yes.
We're coming up on the end of the hour. I've got a couple of really quick questions that hopefully there's relatively quick answers for, so we can get these both in. First of all, you've done a masterful job of partnering social science with weather science, put them together and talk about the importance of them together. I know your NWA, looks like maybe you still are. A lot of college students there. What do you tell college students that might want to pursue that same combination that you're doing?
Yeah, there's no single pathway to do it. I think go find what you're most inspired by and love in the social sciences. There are great institutes you can go to that are interdisciplinary, like the Natural Hazard Center, Disaster Research Center, if you want to be hazards and disaster focused, or go get, you can get a degree in any of the social sciences and vector in. It's an entrepreneurial space, and we need a lot of creativity right now.
Terrific. And I have one last question. I hear you like the Goo Goo Dolls, and you like to find the weather in their lyrics. Is that right?
Oh, yes.
I dug deep. Go ahead.
You did. I'm actually going to see them tomorrow. I'm so excited.
Not Huntsville, certainly.
not in Huntsville, no, back in Oklahoma City. But they put out an album in 2006, the Love In album. It has actually a hurricane reference, but it has 3 distinct references to severe weather. And it's entirely possible that I quasi-stalked them to try to invite them out storm chasing. I'm still sad to this day that they never took me up on it.
There's still time. There's still time.
There's still time.
Thank you for a terrific presentation today. We really appreciate it. Well done. Well done. Thank you
for having me, guys.
How would you learn?
Oh, so much stuff. I wanted to ask you, Kim, how can our listeners find you and your team online?
Sure. Honestly, the best way to probably follow me is through a companion podcast that I help to run called Weather Brains. And we have weekly discussions on a variety of these kinds of topics. Please look for me there.
Terrific. Bill, what did we learn?
Well, we should change our names to Weather Brainless.
That's the eye wall of experts.
I
watching y'all circle.
I can't picture just any one thing. It's just the whole idea that we're really so many more people in the enterprise are actually concerned about these issues and working on them. And yeah, I could see it, looking back 12 years and looking at the products now coming out of the Hurricane Center, which is what I still keep track of, how much of that social science has been incorporated into what they do. This guy's nowhere to go but up. We're going to keep growing on this till I think the holy grail is when the technology allows us to get so specific, we can tell the person in their house what the range of possibilities are at their house for what will happen. That's when we'll start getting breakthroughs.
We're getting there. Got a long way to go.
Of course, most of us down here in Galveston County, when you start doing that, we'll say, I'm going to put for sale sign. I'm going to get the hell out of here.
Hopefully not this week. We're good to go for another week. Right. Lady and gentlemen, thank you so much for a great program today. Fascinating stuff, as always. We appreciate y'all being part of it. Let's thank our sponsors who are part of it as well. Can't do it without them. USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, Weather Boy, and LiveView, all part of the program this week and every week, and we certainly appreciate them being a part of what we're doing here. Next week, I'm scrolling here, Jason Aragoni will be with us. He is at Home Depot, so we're going to talk about things that they do and the role they play in helping communities before, during, and after disasters. That's it for today. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.